Tonight, the White House tries to set the record straight about those U.S. airstrikes on Iran.
Iran's nuclear capabilities were indeed destroyed.
New details of the bombing leave big, unanswered questions about the damage it caused. As Donald Trump takes aim at Canada's auto industry,
we don't really want cars from Canada.
We break down what it would take for a Canadian company to make a Canadian car.
We're talking billions of dollars.
And the rich and famous are in Venice for Jeff Bezos' wedding, and so are the protesters.
We think that one big billionaire can't rent a city for his pleasure.
The backlash threatening to crash the billionaire's party.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrienne Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. The Trump administration is firing back tonight, insisting U.S. bombs obliterated Iran's nuclear capabilities. That is, despite leaked intelligence suggesting otherwise. In a seething press conference, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth called the bombing the most complex and secretive military operation in history, and he launched a salvo of scorn at the media for questioning its success. But Paul Hunter shows us behind the Trump administration's apparent confidence is the fact that there is a lot we do not know.
The video I'm about to show you.
In efforts to demonstrate the extent of what happened when the U.S. bombed Iran's nuclear facilities Sunday, this video, played back at the Pentagon, of a test bombing, showing how so-called bunker busters do what they do.
Unlike a normal surface bomb, you won't see an impact crater.
This after questions on whether Sunday's bombing actually had its intended effect of eliminating Iran's nuclear capabilities.
The mission, which will go down in the history books, was an overwhelming success.
The White House pushing back on leaked preliminary findings from the Pentagon's own intelligence agency suggesting the opposite.
There is broad consensus emerging already that Iran's nuclear capabilities were indeed destroyed. It was a total obliteration, as the president said.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth echoing the White House view, then lambasting reporters for their stories casting doubt on it.
There are so many aspects of what our brave men and women did that, because of the hatred of this press corps, are undermined because people are trying to leak and spin that it wasn't successful. It's irresponsible. How about we talk about how special America is, that only we have these capabilities? I think it's too much to ask, unfortunately, for the fake news.
Meanwhile, the United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency now describing Iran's largest nuclear facility as no longer operational, though not saying for how long. And despite the damage caused, these are the bombers returning to the U.S. Other reports suggest Iran had somehow salvaged some of its uranium stockpile, key to nuclear weaponry. On that, said Hegseth.
So I'm not aware of any intelligence that I've reviewed that says things were not where they were supposed to be.
And for his part, Adrian, Donald Trump called that Pentagon briefing one of the greatest, most professional and confirming news conferences he's ever seen.
And we have also, Paul, now heard from Iran's supreme leader.
Yeah, indeed. The Ayatollah appeared on camera today for the first time since the bombings. Among other things, he said the words Iran and surrender don't match. That's ridiculous, he said. The White House, meanwhile, insisting it's on a diplomatic path with Iran and that Trump wants peace. Adrian.
Paul Hunter in Washington. Thank you. Briar Stewart joins us now from the Iranian border in the Turkish city of Van. Briar, the key question here seems to be about Iran's uranium stockpiles.
Yes, Adrian. Before the strikes, the International Atomic Energy Agency said that Iran had 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. In order to have weapons-grade uranium, it needs to be enriched to about 90%. And experts say Iran could do that in a week or two if it had the right equipment, the centrifuges needed for enrichment, and of course the uranium. Iran says it moved it. It told the IAEA that it had taken special measures. There were satellite photos that showed cargo trucks at the Fordow site a few days before America launched its strikes. But the Trump administration says there's no indication that the uranium has been moved.
And now it seems that Iran's parliament has passed a bill to stop cooperation with the IAEA.
Yeah, the bill has been passed by lawmakers, though it still needs to be enacted by the country's leadership. But if Iran stops cooperating with the IAEA, it means that inspectors will no longer be able to access the sites, and Iran will be in breach of its obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty again. But experts say there's limited repercussions because Iran is already sanctioned. The fear is that it would go to rebuild its program even more secretly, leading to further escalation and conflict.
Briar Stewart near the Iranian border tonight. Israel is accusing Hamas of stealing humanitarian aid, and so it is cutting off deliveries to northern Gaza for at least 48 hours as people there continue to scramble for food.
I went because I'm hungry. My father's hungry, my mom's hungry. Am I sick? I have to bring her food. There's no way else. I have to bring her food.
A procession of people lugged bags of flour through the streets of Han Yunis after an aid truck was reportedly looted. Gaza tribal groups say they provide protection for aid deliveries and deny Hamas has stolen aid. But since Israel lifted a blockade back in May, the UN says only a fraction of the needed supplies are getting to the population, driving Gazans to desperation. Well, Prime Minister Mark Carney's nation-building project bill is now law. It gives the federal government sweeping new powers.
Is it your pleasure, honourable senators, to adopt the motion? Adoptee. Carried.
Bill C-5 passed the Senate and received royal assent. Some projects, like pipelines, can now be fast-tracked through the approvals. Carney pitched the law as a way to fight back against the U.S. trade war. In just 3 weeks, the bill was tabled and passed with support from MPs on both sides of the political spectrum. Well, there's more backlash tonight, too. Alberta's decision to end free COVID vaccines for most people. The province says it is trying to avoid wasting doses, but as Paige Parsons shows us, this is raising questions about access and protection for seniors.
This pharmacist has been hearing from customers ever since Alberta announced it's ending free COVID vaccines for all.
People are scared.
The province says most people will have to pay an estimated $110 per dose. Only certain high-risk groups will still get it for free, and pharmacists will no longer be able to give the shot.
And we're still giving it to most of the people when they ask for it, but we have no clue when they're gonna when is the cut-off time for not having the vaccine.
Some unions are now pushing employers to add coverage for COVID vaccines to group health benefits.
What that means is that it will fall onto the insurance companies, which will mean increased premiums, both for employees and employers.
Nonprofit insurance provider Alberta Blue Cross says it's getting questions about adding coverage for the vaccine, but figuring out which plans could be eligible is a complex process that will take time. Paying out of pocket for the COVID vaccine makes Alberta an outlier in Canada. Even in the U.S., 90% of people get it for free under federal regulations.
Any vaccine that's recommended by that committee must be covered by all the major insurers, both public and private in the U.S. So that would include Medicare, Medicaid, nearly all the private plans, and that would be at no cost to the patient.
The province says the move cuts costs. $135 million worth of doses went to waste last season. The province says when deciding who still gets a free shot, it referenced national guidelines and also considered what it calls Alberta's specific needs. But the largest group those guidelines say should get immunized is now left out, people over 65.
We do see that the risk of severe outcomes goes up quite a lot from age 65 on, and even especially after age 75, regardless of whether or not there's other medical features at play.
Dr. Saxinger says that she worries that by putting a price tag on the vaccine, it sends a message to seniors that it's not a public health priority and that they may not need to worry about getting it.
Paige, is there any sense of what else may have factored into the province's decision here?
The province has also cited low uptake of the COVID vaccine in the general population as part of the reason behind this change in policy. But critics have said, that the province didn't do a great job of promoting the COVID vaccine and educating the public on its benefits.
Okay. Paige Parsons in Edmonton, thank you. There's confirmation tonight that a Canadian citizen has died while in the custody of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, better known as ICE. The agency, which has been making sweeping arrests in recent months, says a 49-year-old Canadian died in a detention center while awaiting proceedings to remove him from the country. The cause of death has not been determined. Minister of Foreign Affairs Anita Anand says Canada is urgently seeking more information. And a 9-year-old boy has died after he was struck by a school bus in Elmont, Ontario, just west of Ottawa. It happened Wednesday while the child was biking home. Police say many teachers and students were on the bus at the time. A vigil is growing outside his school as friends and family mourn. The Ontario government appears poised to bring police officers back to public schools. While some welcome the move, others say officers make some students feel unsafe. Ithil Musa explains.
We keep us safe. We keep us safe. The rain couldn't keep these demonstrators away. They're protesting proposed legislation that could force some school boards to put police officers in public schools.
We will fight! We will fight! We will win! We will win!
The legislation would require school boards to bring in school resource officers, or SROs, where they are offered by local police. The Toronto District School Board got rid of SROs in 2017 after finding it caused some students to feel intimidated. And in 2021, trustees at the Ottawa Carleton District School Board voted to cut the SRO program because of similar concerns among racialized students.
Studies from Toronto, Peel, and other regions have showed that young Black students in particular report being stopped, being surveilled, sometimes being arrested and even violently detained by police, often for issues that are minor disciplinary issues, disagreements with other children.
But having police inside schools can promote safety and foster important connections, says the Provincial Police Association.
The goal of the programs is to bridge the gap between police and youth and build positive relationships.
But their presence could have the opposite effect, warns this academic.
Putting SROs in schools increases punitive forms of discipline, where principals and teachers will turn to the police officer in their school to help them with things that they might not have turned to them for in the past.
Ontario's premier says the message he's received from parents has been overwhelmingly positive.
We aren't going in there and putting a heavy arm with the police, and no, they're part of the community.
The bill is expected to go to a final vote in the fall. The Ford government's majority means it will likely pass. Ithil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Billionaire Frank Stronach is now set to stand trial before a judge alone when his sexual assault trial gets underway in Toronto next year. Stronach's defense lawyer says he switched from a jury trial with the Crown's consent in a hearing this morning. Today, the businessman pleaded not guilty to 12 charges. The 92-year-old was charged last year with 18 counts of sexual assault involving 13 complainants from across Ontario. Well, some transplant patients in Nova Scotia are facing crushing costs. The surgery might be covered, but it takes travel, time, and money to get to a hospital that provides the procedure. And as Carolyn Ray reports, a lot of that is coming out of pocket.
A simple walk into her home. For Nan Clark, this was impossible last summer.
It's amazing how good you do feel.
Clark had a double lung transplant 6 months ago, a surgery that gave her a second chance at life, but came with a financial toll.
I think it's abhorrent. I can't believe that they do this to transplant patients.
There are only 4 lung transplant centers in Canada: Vancouver, Edmonton, Toronto, and Montreal. So patients like Clark have to travel from Nova Scotia to Toronto for life-saving care. The province offers $3,000 a month to cover the cost of accommodation while getting treatment at Toronto General Hospital. Clark's husband says they had to pay $35,000 on top of the provincial funding for months of rent in Toronto.
And this is just not right. Anybody who has to leave the province for medical care should have a reasonable compensation.
Verbena Brenton Gogan's husband Don died in May. 4 months after his transplant. The costs of being there led them to sell their car and ATV. Now she's selling her home to pay the remaining bills.
And the politicians need to recognize that this is life or death. This is basic medical coverage when you're sick. This is not asking for something above and beyond. It's asking for medical coverage.
Budgets can only go so far, says the province's health minister.
These aren't easy decisions, but we have a finite system with infinite requests, and so we continue to do what we can. We always wish we could do more, but we will continue to hear from people to understand their experience.
I just think it's cruel. It's cruel.
Clark says her fight isn't over. She plans on using her new strength to spark change. Carolyn Ray, CBC News, head of St. Margaret's Bay, Nova Scotia.
Prince Edward is in the province that bears his name on the first leg of a royal visit. Today, the Duke of Edinburgh took part in a drumming circle and mingled with islanders ahead of a military ball on Friday. Edward is Colonel-in-Chief of the Prince Edward Island Regiment, which is celebrating its 150th anniversary. Other stops for the prince are Toronto and Ottawa. Well, Hollywood royalty is among the rich and famous descending on Venice. That is where billionaire Jeff Bezos is getting married. But as Magda Gebrselassie shows us, not everyone in that famed city is thrilled about it.
From Oprah to Leonardo DiCaprio to the Kardashian-Jenner gang, the rich and famous have flocked to Venice for the 3-day wedding festivities of billionaire Jeff Bezos and his bride Lauren Sanchez. But with the celebration comes backlash. Protesters have been plastering the city with anti-Bezos banners. Among their concerns, fighting unchecked wealth.
The problem is not the wedding. The problem is the system. We think that one big billionaire can't rent a city for his pleasure.
But city officials don't agree with the protesters.
I don't think that it's up to them or up to the city or up to politics to say who can or cannot get married in Venice.
The deputy mayor is adamant that the wedding, with some 200 guests, many arriving by private jet, will not negatively impact the city.
There is no public space involved, no public sort of privatization of the city involved. It's just an international guest with his own friends.
Still, this is no ordinary wedding. While many of the details of the multi-million-dollar event remain a secret, reports say gondolas are on hold and airspace is closed to drones and unauthorized air traffic. Also, apparently Saturday's event has changed. Protesters had threatened to disrupt it.
Wealth inequality is galloping ahead. And at a time when young people can't find a place to live, and then there's these ostentatious examples that are getting bigger and bigger every year.
Not everyone here is finding fault with that. This shop owner thinks the wedding is a positive thing for all Venetians. Bezos and Sanchez may be out to prove that, reportedly making donations to local causes. Magda Gebrselassie, CBC News, Toronto.
Fashion icon Anna Wintour is stepping down as editor-in-chief of Vogue after 37 years. That is the longest any editor has held that role. Wintour will stay on as Condé Nast's global chief content officer, as well as Vogue's global editorial director. She took over the coveted position from Grace Mirabella and put out her first issue back in November of 1988. A Canadian woman says she was wrongly forced to remove her hijab before boarding a Flair Airlines flight.
I don't know what else I could do. We are not allowed to remove hijab in public.
What she went through and how Flair is responding. Plus, a new mission begins aboard the International Space Station.
Commander Peggy Whitson, the first one across the A-Pass hatch.
And a close encounter with a great white shark.
Look at him bite the boat!
We're back in 2.
The Toronto Raptors select Colin Murray Boyles from the University of South Carolina.
A head shake and what appears to be a curse word after Colin Murray Boyles heard he was being drafted to the Toronto Raptors. He's now clarified that was just a moment of disbelief that he'd been drafted into the NBA, calling it a surreal moment. Well, French-Canadian filmmaker Denis Villeneuve is set to direct the 26th James Bond film, best known for his work on Dune and Blade Runner. Villeneuve called the opportunity an honor, vowing to stay true to the Bond legacy. The future of the franchise had been uncertain since Amazon took control back in February. Production is expected to begin next year. A Winnipeg woman is speaking out, saying she was humiliated when she was forced to remove her hijab while boarding a flight. As Mike Arsenault explains, she'd already cleared customs and security in Toronto before she was stopped.
This is the picture of all of us going there.
Kazi Amin's return flight from a family visit in Bangladesh was shocking. On her way home, she changed planes in Toronto and cleared customs, but says she was stopped by a Flair Airlines employee when she tried to board her plane.
The airline employee took my passport, look at my passport and look at me and say that my passport doesn't match with my face. So I have to remove my headscarf.
Amin's headscarf, or hijab, is a religious garment worn by some Muslim women. Amin explained the hijab can't be taken off for religious purposes. She says Flair wouldn't listen.
I don't know what else I could do. I removed my hijab. In public, we are not allowed to remove hijab in public. We can remove hijab only in front of our family.
Amin's passport photo was taken in 2016 before she wore a hijab. She says Flair told her to take it off because her hair was different. Amin's daughter, Afsara Raida, says that's not a reasonable excuse.
I'm blonde right now. I can go back to being dark-haired, right? So is she gonna go make me bleach my hair right then and there before I board the aircraft? Doesn't make sense.
Amin had cleared both customs and security when she was asked to take off the headscarf.
The Canadian Air Transport Security Authority's website says passengers don't have to remove religious head coverings unless an alarm goes off during security screening. The guidelines go on to say if a physical search is required, passengers are supposed to be given the option to have that search conducted in private. Amin says she wasn't given that option.
Flair says an employee is on leave and there's an investigation. It says the worker is employed by Flair's ground partner, AGI. A statement from Flair says, in part, "We expect all service partners to uphold the same standards of respect, professionalism, and non-discrimination that we require of our own team." AGI has issued a formal apology to the passenger. Raida says the apology is vague. She'd like to see it address her mother directly and post it across Flair's social media platforms so the public can see it.
It's not just to my mother. There's a lot of other people that have gone through a similar situation, and it's not just Muslim women.
Raida says she's talking with her lawyer about taking legal action. Mike Arsenault, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A new study has found old, inactive oil wells are polluting significantly more than previously thought.
I can't even go outside without getting burning eyes.
How these sites can impact the environment. The push for a bumper-to-bumper Canadian car.
The world's changed by people with crazy ideas. So let's follow some crazy ideas.
What it would take to get the idea out of the garage. And telling stories through an Indigenous lens.
Action.
The National breaks down stories shaping our world. Next.
Axiom at Mission 4, welcome aboard the International Space Station.
The crew of the Axiom Mission 4 is now on board the ISS. The mission includes a former NASA astronaut as well as 3 others from India, Poland, and Hungary. All 3 are the first from their countries to visit the space station. They are finally starting a 2-week research mission after a series of delays pushed the mission back from May. Now to concerns back here on Earth about hundreds of thousands of inactive oil and gas wells across the country. A new study suggests they are leaking more methane, a potent greenhouse gas, than previously thought. Inayat Singh explains.
We're on Forestry Farm Road, adjacent to an erupting abandoned gas well.
This gas well in southwestern Ontario stopped operating decades ago, but still belches hydrogen sulfide and methane into its surroundings.
Some days I can't even go outside without getting burning eyes and sore throat.
We have this beautiful property that we can't use because it's just seeping out of the ground into the swamp.
There are over 400,000 non-producing wells across Canada. This researcher says the problem is much bigger than previously thought.
I think non-producing wells have not been a big focus of methane mitigation efforts thus far because active production emissions are substantially higher.
In a new study, her team measured methane leaks at non-producing wells across Canada and found that methane emissions from these wells are 7 times higher than Canada's current estimates.
Hopefully that will lead to more emissions reductions and more development of smart mitigation strategies.
Methane from these wells account for 13% of greenhouse gas emissions from Canada's oil and gas sector, according to the new figures. Experts say solutions vary widely, from more funding to stronger rules about cleanup. Residents living nearby want more urgency to solve the problem.
It stinks incredibly. And then, of course, it is the gases emanating that you can't see or smell, such as methane, that are having an impact on climate change.
In response to the new study, Environment and Climate Change Canada said it is reviewing how it calculates its estimates for methane emissions from non-producing wells. Inayat Singh, CBC News, Norfolk County, Ontario.
Now, let's break down the news shaping our world. Why Indigenous films and TV shows are breaking through to a wider audience.
People are reaching out from Brazil. People are reaching out from Australia.
But first, can tariffs and threats fire up the drive to build an all-Canadian car?
I love the idea or the aspiration. President Trump actually gave Canada a gift.
This patriotic notion has a lot of people talking.
Let's give them a Canadian team to cheer for.
But does anyone have the guts and the money?
And we're talking billions of dollars. Billions.
So with all that uncertainty over trade, Nick Purdon started asking what it would take to make a truly homegrown vehicle that could go the distance.
Canada has got to think for itself. Make a vehicle that is one that many Canadians can drive.
You could make $5 or $10 billion disappear and have nothing to show for it.
Do we have the people? Yes. Do we have the know-how? Yes. But do we have the desire and the passion?
Good.
Earlier this year, Prime Minister Mark Carney met with President Donald Trump for the first time. And when that meeting was almost over, Trump said something that really could change Canada forever.
We want to make our own cars. We don't really want cars from Canada. We put tariffs on cars from Canada, and at a certain point, it won't make economic sense for Canada to build those cars.
If Donald Trump were to get what he wants and the Canadian auto industry fails, the repercussions would be massive. By any measure, cars drive our economy. Thousands of jobs, billions in GDP. So what do? Well, what if one of the ways to protect Canadian manufacturing was to build a Canadian car? Is that even feasible? And what would it mean for the country?
Steel comes in on the press.
Meet Rob Wildeboer. He's the co-founder of Martin Ray International, one of the biggest auto part makers in the country.
When I was 7 years old, it was Canada's 100th anniversary. We were the 3rd richest country in the world. At that time, we just built the St. Lawrence Seaway, which was a monumental project. We built the highest tower in the world. We thought big. That's how we got to be thinking here. Think big, make a car, make a great car. So we do a lot of chassis parts, and the chassis is basically the base of the vehicle.
If you're thinking to yourself, we're going to make a car, a Canadian car, isn't that a crazy idea? It turns out Rob kind of agrees with you.
Well, when we started this auto parts company, people said, "What are you doing? We got lots of auto parts companies." They thought we were nuts. They thought I was nuts. I had no auto parts background. The world's changed by people with crazy ideas. So let's follow some crazy ideas and make them successful.
Rob's sure done that with his own company. He co-founded Martin Ray in 2001. 20 plus years later, they now pull in $5 billion in revenue.
We have a lot of wealth in this country, like you said.
It's not just Rob who's interested in the idea. The president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturing Association, Flavio Volpe, is too. He says the expertise to build Canadian already exists. Flavio represents 250 Canadian automotive supply companies.
So we've made 120 million cars in this country since 1904. Okay? So we know how to make cars. We're currently making them for 5 automakers who have heavily invested in this country. We do all this together. If we have everything that will make these companies from the US and Japan and Germany profitable and solid, how is it not true for Canadians? I said, you know, you're nuts.
Listening to Flavio, it's hard not to get caught up in his optimism.
100 million people buy new cars a year. They know that car. They cheer for them like a home team. Let's give them a Canadian team to cheer for. The fastest, the most expensive, the most...
Flavio is calling for a feasibility study into what it would take to build a Canadian car.
Do you think Canadians would buy a Canadian car out of pride?
Yes, the first batch.
Yeah.
And then
it's got to make it on quality. It's got to deliver. It's got to deliver a product. It's got to meet the needs of people.
Yeah. So this is the Mini Baja vehicle. Why don't you guys explain what you got here?
Canada can even consider building its own car because of places like this.
A AA arm setup. We have our...
The lab at the Automotive Engineering program at the University of Windsor. This is where Peter Fries teaches students how to build a car.
That's the Schrader valve there, so you know it's an air shock.
Peter is an engineer who specializes in automotive. He makes a point of telling his students how tough the business
that
is.
One was red. So arrive early, stay late, ask good questions, and listen when your boss talks to you.
Peter has given a lot of thought to the idea of a Canadian car, and he has concerns.
I think a lot of people would love to see a Canadian car. I would, but who is going to step forward from the private sector to invest the money to get a big car company going, a credible car company that can make credible products that are competitive in the marketplace? And we're talking billions of dollars, billions.
You know, is this one of those times when you have to separate your heart from your head?
You can't make emotional decisions about money and technology. These are much too complicated, much too expensive to make on an emotional basis. You can see how body structures are put together. All these little dimples here.
Let's say if somebody wanted to design a brand new car, what's the timeline on that?
It takes between 2 and 5 years to design a new car. I mean, you could design and build a great car and have no customers. The car companies compete ferociously to get a few tenths of a % of market share gain. This car company will have no track record, and I'd be concerned that there will not be enough customers to sustain this.
Peter points out that this has actually happened. You may not have heard about it, but in the mid-70s in New Brunswick, they made the Bricklin. At the time, Premier Richard Hatfield said some things that really could apply to Canada today.
We in New Brunswick, in the opinion of many, are not supposed to be in the business of producing automobiles. We are supposed to be hewers of wood and drawers of water. We are supposed to be content with smaller dreams.
The Bricklin was a disaster. It flamed out in a few years. They only built about 3,000 cars.
First of all, don't build a sports car. I love sports cars. I own a sports car, but not very many people buy sports cars.
So the Bricklin is a cautionary tale.
Yes, it's a cautionary tale of what can happen if you build the wrong product in the wrong place and don't have a market. You could make $5 or $10 billion disappear and have nothing to show for it.
That's the risk, and it's a serious one. So is there anyone who would consider investing in a Canadian car?
I am the guy that you would go to say, I have a Canadian solution. I provide the capital for those entrepreneurs who want to build Canada.
Meet John Ruffalo, venture capitalist and founder of Mavericks Private Equity. He backed Shopify from the very beginning. He tells me what he's looking to invest in today.
In the case of Canada right now, our focus on our investment fund is those things that are critical to the sovereignty and security of this country. And transportation is something that is critical. I love the idea or the aspiration of a Canadian car.
John believes that today we shouldn't depend on other countries to build our vehicles. And he sees Trump's threat to Canada's sovereignty as a wake-up call.
President Trump actually gave Canada a gift. It's really the first time that Canada or Canadians are looking back and saying, how did we allow ourselves to get into the vulnerable position that we are in? We're now looking at how do we build things for ourselves. I have never seen more energy in my entire career about Canadians actually building for their own control and mapping out their own destiny.
Whether a Canadian car actually gets built or not, dreaming big again can't be a bad thing.
What would it mean to you if a Canadian car got built?
Well, I'd buy one. I'd buy one, and I'd make sure my kids buy one too. If you think about a Canadian car, it's a symbol of our independence. It's a symbol of our talent. But you have to show it. You got to prove it. Talk is cheap. You got to get it done.
It really struck me how passionate people are about this idea of a Canadian car. I mean, everybody we spoke to, they talked about Trump, they talked about tariffs, the uncertainty, the difficulty of doing business today, but not in a downer kind of way, in a motivated way. And, you know, this idea of economic sovereignty, the idea that Canada should economically stand on its own. And, you know, obviously the car is an example of that, but it's probably the best symbol of that too.
I hear all the passion from you, from them, but if we step back for a little bit, what does your spidey sense tell you about how likely it is this will happen?
I would not bet against these people. The people we spoke to, they convinced me 100% that they're for real. And why not do a feasibility study into the idea of a Canadian car? And I should point out that in Mexico, they're building their own car. They're building an EV. In Mexico, much like Canada, historically, they've assembled cars for foreign companies. They've built car parts for foreign companies. President Sheinbaum of Mexico has said their car will be small, affordable, and 100% built and assembled in Mexico. Vietnam is building their own EV. Turkey is building their own EV. So the question could be, what are the risks if Canada doesn't do something like that?
I cannot wait to find out. I know you are on it, Nick. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Indigenous stories are gaining popularity at an unprecedented rate.
People are reaching out from Brazil. People are reaching out from Australia.
What's behind the newfound success? What's behind the surge of Indigenous entertainment getting widespread acclaim?
Now we're making our own.
Creators say mainstream projects are finally shedding stereotypes.
Am I doing this the right way? Or am I perpetuating harmful narratives?
How social awareness unlocked opportunity. Magda Gebrselassie shows us some of the rising stars and behind-the-scenes talent as they all seize this long-awaited moment.
Leaving it all on the ice. Young Indigenous hockey players flex their acting chops on the set of Smudge the Blades in Edmonton. The film is about an under-18 Indigenous hockey team, its players battling through their final year in a Northern Alberta hockey league.
And action.
Cody Lightning is the man behind it all. After spending 30 years in show business, mostly as an actor, he's now part of a wave of creatives telling stories through an Indigenous lens.
I've watched throughout the years, there was a lot of period pieces made, you know, leathers and feathers, so to say, a lot of the same things, and there was like one project per year that everyone knew about, everyone was trying to be on those projects, and now we're making our own.
I am a modern Inuk woman.
And making hits. Take North of North, an APTN, CBC, and Netflix series. The comedy is capturing audiences around the world.
People are reaching out from Brazil. People are reaching out from Australia. And it's just, I think at the heart of North is, you know, even though it's a very specific place and a specific people, it's just such a deeply relatable story.
Recently, Indigenous talent have also been breaking barriers in award categories. Last year, Lily Gladstone made history with her Golden Globe win and Oscar nomination for Killers of the Flower Moon. And Emmy's acting nominations saw Gladstone, True Detective's Kaylee Reese, and DeFero Wanatai from Reservation Dogs making headlines too.
I think that was such an incredible show for everybody.
Jennifer Podemski was on 3 episodes of the series about teens on a reservation in Oklahoma. First airing in 2021, it lasted 3 seasons and was applauded for being part of a rising wave of Indigenous representation on screens.
I've been thinking a lot about my real family.
Podemski, who creates her own shows like Little Bird, says she's noticed a shift in the industry following the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer in 2020.
Everything that happened afterwards turned people's attention to the communities who had the smallest voice and the least represented voice. When people are casting for movies, they're more inclined to, question, like, am I doing this the right way? Or am I perpetuating harmful narratives?
Podemski believes this has led to more opportunities. Here in Canada, she credits the Indigenous Screen Office. It supports Indigenous creators bringing their stories to screens. Federal funding, including last year's announcement of $65 million over 5 years, helps with that.
I think that's why we're seeing this huge surge in filmmakers, is because there's access to funding now, there's support. People can make a living on being a creative basically in this industry. And I think people are understanding what we're here for as well.
Over the years, the ISO has provided support to more than 300 films, TV shows, and other screen content. That includes Smudge the Blades, which is aiming to make the rounds during the fall festival season.
And yes, to reiterate, those are actual young hockey players on the ice in Smudge the Blades. Creator Cody Lightning has said that the hockey had to look authentic on screen. He'd rather coach athletes to express themselves than teach actors to play hockey. Quick question for you. Can romance survive in our modern online world? Director Celine Song tackles that idea in her just-released movie, Materialist. Here's a quick peek at her interview with Eli Glasner.
The thing that I am very concerned about is the way that we commodify and objectify each other and eventually ourselves too. And there's a line in my film where a character says, "I'm not merchandise, I'm a person." Yeah. And I think that so much of what is happening on our phones or what's happening in the modern world, especially as we start to lean on algorithms and lean on numbers, is that it's only getting faster and easier to treat each other like we're merchandise. There's such a language about self-improvement, right, for example, where it's like Botox, right, anything from going to the gym or going to do this. And there's so many ways that there's so many industries that are about improving your value as merchandise.
Right.
But the truth is that a merchandise cannot fall in love with another merchandise. Only thing that is possible is for a person to fall in love with another person.
You can watch Eli's full interview with Celine Song Friday on The National. Well, up next, a great white shark takes a bite out of a fishing boat.
I've seen enough shows on Shark Week and YouTube and all that stuff that I knew I've seen a great white in front of me.
The reaction on board to this very close encounter in our moment. Well, that's more than a little intimidating. You are looking at a great white shark getting extremely close to a fishing boat off the coast of Cape Breton. So Jimmy MacArthur was aboard that boat, captured the moment the shark approached, and tonight that encounter is our moment.
Oh my God, look at this! We were lobster fishing that day. I noticed this splash on top of the water, and it wasn't like a whale or a dolphin or anything like that. I said, boys, that's something different.
See the seal on top of the water?
We noticed a dorsal fin, a big dorsal fin out of the water, so we knew what we were dealing with right away. I've seen enough shows on Shark Week and YouTube and all that stuff that I knew I've seen a great white in front of me. Well, he made 2 circles and he came back.
Hey, look at him biting the boat!
And then after he bit the boat, he kind of kept going. He was at least 14 feet to maybe 15. He was a monster. I wasn't nervous because I got a big boat. 2 other fellows that are on my boat, they're fishing with me now 15 years or more, and they never seen anything like that before either. It was something, it was a really good experience. I'm a big fan of the Jaws movie, and this year was the 50th anniversary, so it worked out pretty good for me.
Okay, I love how calm he is. This apparently lasted for 4 minutes, and get this, it wasn't far from where Canada reported its first ever shark attack in 2021, and the number of sightings has only gone up. So that's something to look forward to this summer. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.